Thanks for joining us on TTV, and today I'm honored to be here with Richard Rudis, who is an American Buddhist. And I'm going to ask Richard to give you a little history on how he came to Buddhism. I think that's a fascinating story in itself. I understand you started out as an engineer and found your way to Buddhism.
Yeah, my first degree is in engineering. I have a few different variable degrees, but I have a Western mind. I'm very interested in tools and how they can be applied to anything from building bridges to altering consciousness, and that's essentially brought me to the instruments, the sacred instruments that I use in this experience or in vibrational healing in general. Buddhism, it all stems from my Vajrayana school of Buddhism, and specifically Tibetan Buddhism. I spent time when I was lost. My religion I was brought up with failed me. I was in need of some guidance and was unable to find it until I started studying Eastern philosophy, and ultimately that brought me to Tibetan Buddhism, which is a philosophy and not a religion. I think that's important to stress. And then ultimately to Vajrayana, which is a teaching that tells us that we are already Buddhas, that we're already enlightened beings. It's a given that can't be altered in any way, no matter how much stuff we pile on top of that diamond itself. It is unchanging. Why we don't realize our enlightenment or our transcendent self is another story that has to do with karma, that has to do with life stories and things of that nature. But everything becomes an opportunity to peel away the layers of confusion or delusional thinking that keeps us from knowing our true Buddha self, our enlightened self.
I know I've been to one of your Gong Baths many times each year as you come out. I would tell you that it does resonate at like a soul level. It's a clearing. I've brought many friends, and many of them will talk about feeling wonderful for months after. It's as if it clears something, maybe that stuff that's covering the diamond.
Yeah, I really play the instrument for that in that way. I use phenomenal aspects of, because we're phenomenal beings. So I'll use things that are historically physically embedded in the architecture of the universe, such as sacred geometry and various number systems that are applicable or obvious within the structure of, say, the human body, or the leaf structure on a tree, or the seed structure in a sunflower, or something of that nature. These numbers are repeating themselves over and over again, and they're seen in the micro and the macro world. So by applying those to these phenomenal aspects, it resonates with aspects of ourselves. And essentially, the way I play the instrument or instruments is to find an opening, to first establish an entrainment, a safety, where the mind can feel relaxed, and the fight or flight complex or built-in practice or emotional aspect of ourselves and biological aspect of ourselves is put to rest. So then we kind of overcome that hurdle to begin with, and then we can begin to initiate at a cellular level, at an emotional, mental level, and ultimately at a spiritual level to pull away some of the habitual thought forms that keeps us from realizing our greatest self, or on the physical level, the toxins that have built up over time, sometimes in my philosophy, sometimes over lifetimes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I know there's another practitioner provider that we've interviewed who talks about the impact of thoughts, traumas, and toxins.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that the sacred sound probably addresses all three.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know when you open a gong bath, which you've so named, and we'll talk about that in a moment, you open with a ting sha.
I do.
And if we could show folks what a ting
Sure.
sha is. And having taken your class, I know that there's something that you do 3 times.
Because the tradition uses it in sets of 3. And 3 is one of those numbers that are repeated in growth patterns. So it's the wavelengths of the ting sha permeate the 6 ways of incarnating within time-space. If you imagine time-space as a sphere, and we're all part of that, the hell beings, the hungry ghosts, the insects and the animals, and the demigods and gods. So these are all ways of phenomenally incarnating within the sphere. The ting shas serve, through their vibrational signature, serves the purpose of permeating those emotional states, if you will. You can imagine someone who is living in the teachings, it's a physical strata of experience. But if we think of it in a more Freudian or more emotional, psychological state of being, we can always find people who are suffering to the point of living in a hell-like state.
Mm-hmm.
Or the second level of that is called the hungry ghost, which is depicted by having cavernous stomachs and pinpoint mouths. So they can never, sort of vampire sort of thing, where they can never take in enough to fill that void inside of them. And I think in anyone's life that is fully and richly examined, we can find all of these states within our own lives at any given point. This permeates those levels in an initiatory sort of way. So it opens the doors for teaching. It also literally invites anything that will support that teaching. So a god or a demigod or maybe that mosquito, flying around, will has a purpose. It will be within the sphere of the teaching by invite, essentially.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It also creates a bubble of protection energetically around the space so that it is safe for someone to energetically open themselves. So it creates the opening status where we can then find ourselves in the gong bath situation, which is more of a sangha of a group of people come together. Even if there is a disruptive force within that gong bath, they pretty quickly are pushed out, or their priorities change under the influence of the ting sha, just to begin with, essentially.
That's beautiful. I know when we have classes and I open with a ting sha, they do feel differently, and people are more open and sharing than if I don't do that.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, in vibrational healing, we use always, the ting shas are always the initiatory experience. We also can use them for diagnostic purposes, how it commingles with the energy of the group, of the individual, and how the way they radiate back or are swallowed will give us an indication of what is going on with the body, what areas need more attention than others.
And you teach that. I know you do a singing bowls and a ting sha class that
I do an introduction.
Yeah, gives you an opening.
An opening, yeah. I'm part of a school in California where we have created a whole curriculum of some 200 hours of study over the course of multiple levels of introduction and multiple advanced classes.
Oh,
So,
we'll have to give everyone a link to that.
yeah, well, that's
Check that out.
and that's a more serious approach to vibrational healing. What I do is in these introductions is introduce the instruments, introduce the biology, the history of the instruments, give people hands-on taste of what the potential is there, but it's really only scratching the surface.
Yeah, I could tell. Enough to make me hungry. Now, I know the next that you go to is you play a singing bowl before you begin with your gong.
No, I normally bring the bowl in, basically because the bowl has a balancing and centering quality to it. So when I begin, I merely strike the bowl. And then in the end, I do the same process only in reverse. I'll take the instrument out of the diminishing sound of the bowl or the gong, bring up the singing the bowl in that way, which picks up the circular aspect of the gong. So it just brings, again, it's sort of I don't want to say entrainment so much. It is an entrainment, but it's a sympathetic resonation with a safe place in our mentality at that point.
Okay.
And then there's other ways of using it. Of course, you can, alter the vibration to match the diminishing voice of the gong at that point, that type of thing.
It's fascinating. There are videos online, and of course, having been here one gong bath, rather than lying down, I decided I wanted to just watch you as you played it, and I sat up against the wall. But to watch how you use
my own chi
in order to affect the tones coming from the gong.
The gong is very receptive to that. Becomes a very personal, intimate experience, actually. I try to stay attuned to the individuals in the room so that the gong can overwhelm if you're not careful. And the gong is, like any modality, has a two-edged sword to it. One is healing and nurturing. The other, if you're not careful, can be disruptive. The gong has multiple overtones to it. Multiple octaves are created based on the root signature of which is 136.1 hertz. The vibrational signature of the earth as it transits around the sun. That I chose, this is a Paiste yearly earth gong. And I chose that particular planetary gong. Paiste makes a brilliant planetary series. But I chose this one because it's the only one that everyone has a bit of that frequency in it, but this one is rooted in that frequency. And that frequency is particularly important because in the Vedic tradition, they identified the seed syllable of Om. If in more Christian terms, when God, in Genesis, when God created the earth, he said, let there be light. So he said it. It was a vibrational signature that brought creation, brought matter, time, space into existence. And in the Hindu tradition, they have a very similar traditional story about the becoming of time and space. That in the deities, the male and female deity that brought time, space into existence, used the syllable Om to do that. I like to think that in science, if there was an impulse that brought all matter from a stagnant force to the dynamic universe that we live in, that impulse was the sound of Om. And in the Vedic tradition, Om has been identified as the 136.1 hertz or C sharp in Eastern tuning. So it's all the drone instruments in Eastern tuning are tuned to 136.1 or C sharp, which this instrument is. But it's a base frequency that then they build mathematical octaves on top of.
That's why there's so many tones. As you listen, it sounds to be so much more.
Right.
You get layers of sound.
Layers and layers of sound. And when you're working with that large palette, if you were a painter, for instance, you might have a palette of multiple colors. If you start mixing those colors together, they come out a pukey gray, essentially. All that beautiful possibility is reduced to mud. You know? So the same thing with sound. You have to spin those octaves off in such a way as they don't cancel each other out or create dissonant frequencies that will cause disturbing factors. Disruption. So I think that's a part of the overall presentation. That's what I meant by a double-edged sword, essentially. So but using my chi is another way of refining the palette, particularly in direction of source. I can spin it off in one direction. I can introduce sacred geometry in that way. So it's just another way, another technique to work with sound.
I know that if you looked around here, various mallets, I know that it is an art form. We talked briefly ahead of time, and as we wrap up, I think that I encourage folks to take a look at the sacred sound as an avenue to look at how to help themselves along their spiritual path, their physical path. But I think what would be the encouragement yet the word of caution? To your point that you've got this beautiful palette, but if you're not careful, you end up with the muddy gray.
Yeah, just if you're seeking out people who are working with vibrational healing, just be selective. I'm not quite sure how one would choose necessarily. Just know that the experience is supportive. It is encouraging. Ultimately, the sound is not doing the work of the healing. It's doing the awakening of the internal physician. We have that potential of healing ourselves, but sometimes we need to be awakened to that, or we need tools that will encourage that aspect of our being. That's what the sacred sound instruments really do. Pull away the layers. They awaken that knowing, and we essentially heal ourselves.
So that may be a way just to find how it resonates with you. So as you check out someone who may be offering sacred sound healing.
That's why we began the school, actually. It's called Tibetan Bowl School, I believe. It's because so many people were using bowls in so many ways that were detrimental, or even if they weren't detrimental, they weren't reaching the fullest potential. They're effective but not effective enough, or not reaching the potential of full effectiveness. So that's our approach anyway. That's the reason behind it.
Well, thank you. I know you have an audience of folks waiting out there to enjoy a gong bath tonight.
Thank you.
So I encourage you, at the bottom of our YouTube is a link to a couple of sites where you can check out the work with Richard Rudis. You can take a look at some of his sound healing CDs that you have out there, as well as to check out the schedule where you can actually go and experience a gong bath with Richard. So thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.